Good evening, everyone. This is Ron. It's a little after 6 p.m. Monday evening, January 30th. So uh, we are well into 2023. So on yesterday, Nick pretty much led the lesson after we did some Q&A, and I'm not very good at summing up Nick, but of course he talked about heaven and hell again and kind of put that in perspective. He talked about the fire, uh, the fire of purification, the fire of hell being one and the same. Uh, he went into his explanation of that, and uh, and of course said some other things that. But any questions? He's not on tonight about his lesson, but anything else that you guys may have heard or seen or would like to discuss, questions and or comments on anything. Okay. I invite you to look at something with me tonight. Let's look at Luke 14 chapter. Would please. I thought this was interesting, and I always see us, see what we are trying to accomplish, or what we are accomplishing rather, and how that affects us, how the scripture guides us, and uh, even what we're saying and doing and feeling and going through, why and what that looks like, and how it affects the universe, what we say and do. Uh, I thought this was interesting. I'm looking at the parable that starts in verse 7. And we'll go down. Okay. We'll, I know when to stop. Okay. I'm going to start in verse 7, and then we'll talk about this parable for a minute. Uh, and he began speaking a parable to the invited guests when he noticed how they were picking out the places of honor at the table, saying to them, when you are invited by someone to a wedding feast, do not take a place of honor, lest someone more distinguished than you may have been invited by him. And he who invited you both shall come and say to you, give place to this man. And then in disgrace you proceed to occupy the last place. But when you are invited, go and recline at the last table, so that when the one who was invited has invited you, come, he may say to you, friend, move up higher, then you will have honor in the sight of all who are at the table with you. For everyone who exalts himself shall be humbled, and he who humbles himself shall be exalted. I thought this was pretty interesting, uh, and I want to look at it from a slightly different perspective, because I think, and I hope my example works here. I hope you can see what I'm saying. Uh, I'm gonna give two examples, and I want you to look at this and pick out, talk about what balance looks like, what he calls it being humble, what this looks like, and what even what this desire looks like that Nick talked about yesterday. In my first example, uh, there's a young man on my job, and he came to me one day, and we were just talking, And he told me, and I've said this to somebody else, it may have been Pastor and I talking, but he said to me, uh, my girlfriend and I are having some issues. He said, she's been kind of frustrated lately. And he called me the other day to come in the room and sit down and talk. And he said, he was just going on about some of the stuff I've done and not being home and just a list of stuff. And he said, I sat down and I looked at her. And he said, I saw her and I saw what she was talking about. And he said, when I looked at her, I said to myself, you know, I love this woman. And this is who I want to be with. This is who I want to spend my life with. And I said to him, did you tell her that? And he said, yeah. I said, what did you say to her? He said, I told her, you know, you're right. Everything you saying right now is correct. And I need to check myself. He said, but I want you to know something. I love you. I love being with you. I love you in my life. And I want to grow old with you. I said, you actually said that? He said, yeah. I told her I want to grow old. He said, so whatever you want to do, we'll do it. Whatever, make your list, whatever, let's talk about it. And if you want, if we need counseling, we'll see counseling. But we're going to fix this. This guy is 28, 29 years old. And I thought that was amazing. Now, here's the other scenario. A few years ago, many years ago probably, I was invited to a wedding or be a groomsman in a wedding. And since a lot of the wedding party didn't know each other, we met that Thursday at a cookout. And the bride was there, and she was pairing everybody, you know, all the groomsmen and the bridesmaids together that she wanted to be in the wedding. She paired us all together. And I was quite pleased with the young lady I was paired with. And I thought, wow, okay, this is going to be a nice weekend. Well, the wedding goes on, everything's going fine. And she and I hit it off smoothly. And the groom comes up, and he wants to see me. And this is after the wedding, and everybody's taking pictures, kind of milling around and whatnot. He wants to see me, and he tells me, "Don't try anything because that's my girl." Now I'm confused because you just got married. So I go back to the young lady, and I talk to her. Now me and this guy are best of friends. I go back and I talk to her, and I said, "What's going on?" She says, well, a couple of years ago, Chuck and I were friends. And I introduced him to my best friend because he kept asking me to go out with him. And I didn't want to go. I wanted to just remain friends because I know how he is. I know he's just a ladies' man and out there. She says, I introduced him to my best friend and they hit it off. And she said, afterwards, I became attracted to him. So I started seeing him. So I'm a little confused by this, and he's about to have a fit. So I told him, look, just relax. I'm going to leave. I'm going to leave. I'm going to leave this with you. I said, but you know that your wife deserves better than this. She deserves better than this. Now, I want to take both of those scenarios and kind of lay them on this parable. The first young man says to her, I'll do whatever it takes. I'll do whatever you want to do to make this work. You tell me what to do because I want to grow old with you. The second one does not. He's just the opposite. The point I'm making is, what does balance look like? If you're looking at this and talking about making a commitment. Making a commitment, part of making a commitment is submitting yourself to the process and seeing something that you want and desiring it to a point that you make it happen. So in the first episode, when he says to her, whatever it takes, I will do. And I want to spend the rest of my life with you. That is an example of taking the last seat in the house. I'm going to humble myself. I'm going to lower myself to do whatever it takes to make this happen. Every one of the characters in this parable is internally us. This is talking about us. This is talking about the things that whatever it takes to humble you, to show you who you are, and start that journey to righteousness or to the beginning of who you are, so that you can become enlightenment that you are, or see that you are that enlightenment. So in the first example, what he does by humbling himself, he really becomes one with her. It's a perfect example of what balance looks like. She had a need. She had something that she wanted him to perform, or what to do to change in order to show his commitment that he said that he wanted with her. And he does this. Whatever it takes, I will do. In the other example, the other one appears to make the commitment. He appears to have done all the right things, but his heart is not there. So this is not talking about men. It is not talking about women. It is talking about masculine energy and how it seeks to be dominant and manipulate and do whatever it has to do to have its way. So when he talks about this, the second example I gave is the one who has taken a higher place because he feels that I am justified to do this any way I want to do it. Because, he was a person who was successful at the time, anyway, that I knew him. I hadn't seen him in years. And I think that success in the materialism made him feel entitled to do this to her. And true to what I said to him, the marriage lasted maybe about a year, if that long. But I use those as examples. And before I go any further, any questions or comments? And I hope that made sense. It did make sense.
It made sense.
Yeah, man.
I'm waiting for you to go further in connected to this parable in terms of ability involved. And let me say this: when you were talking, when you finished the second scenario, what came to my mind was this. When we talk about balance sexually or in secular ways, we talk about balance with things balancing out like from one extreme to the other. But that's not what balance is spiritually. So when we look at those two scenarios, they do not represent balance in the sense of spirituality. Why? Because balance in terms of spirituality is when righteousness prevails over everything else. The balance of humanity comes when men see each other as the same and treat each other as the same, and move according to the spiritual. Oh my God, the universe moves them rather with the energy of the universe, regardless of what arena they are moved into. but the actions in physical ways that destroys the emotional or damage the emotional stability of people, whether it is that emotional stability is known or unknown. Because in that second scenario, he destroyed her emotional stability without her knowing it. And the one who said that was her best friend was actually a wolf in sheep's clothing. Because the relationship between her and her friend should not have been where she would sleep with him since she didn't want him in the first place. So what I'm saying in essence is this. Extremes in the spiritual realm don't deal with balance. Does not deal with equality. It deals with quality. Does that make sense?
Explain that, Rep.
It deals with the quality of what I'm speaking is the righteousness overwhelms, or the righteousness prevails in the land. Righteousness shall roll down like the rivers of waters. Righteousness, according to the scriptures, is the prevailing attitude of humanity. Now, just because something looks like it doesn't fit the church pattern, that does not mean that it is unrighteous, because there are things that happen in our lives that brings balance that don't look like balance. For example, if someone says something to you, or if someone is always challenging you and you are their supervisor, and you terminate them to other people who don't know the backstory, that look like you did something mean. But to those who do know the backstory, that is a righteous move that was made. Does that make sense?
Gotcha.
Ron, am I on the right track with you? If you're talking,
yeah, I was, but I'm here. I am. I guess I don't understand balance then, because the first scenario, I do see it as balance.
right. That's balance.
What I'm getting at is there's a reason here that he used invited guests to a wedding, a wedding celebration, a wedding feast. So, in other words, the commitment has been made. What balance talks to me about what you have connected yourself to. How do you find yourself? Where you are elevating yourself to a consciousness. What would you do to elevate yourself? So if I'm wanting to see who I am spiritually, I move in that direction. The balance is when I move from one level of consciousness to another, I submit myself to that. Not just see it, I submit myself to it. So how much of self is being submitted is what I'm saying here. So when he recognized who she really was and decided, you know what, I'm about to blow this, that to me was seeking balance.
That's balance.
That's what I was trying to say.
That's balance.
That's yeah. And
No. What I was looking at, Ron, was both relationships. In the first scenario, okay, his submission brought balance to that relationship. In the second scenario, his decisions threw everything out of balance, and it never was balanced from the day that he started dealing with her best friend.
Yes.
There was no balance whatsoever there.
But it appeared to be right. And what I was going to say, the difference is that's what religion does. It appears to be right. That may have been a poor example, but part of what I was trying to say is we run into scenarios all the time. Something we follow that looks right. It looks like masculinity takes you to pleasure. It takes you to places of dominance, and it appears that that is the right thing to do, but it is not. It most assuredly is not. That's what I was.
I agree 100%.
That's important. Well, I didn't explain that right, but that's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that, because I don't want us to see a balance at like a scale where everything is equal.
Right.
But we're talking about the quality of the quality as opposed to quantitative. Got me?
Yes. Yes. And I don't want to confuse anybody. Somebody else, do you see this? And I again, excuse me, may not have used a good example. I may not.
The examples were good. They really were. But I think that opening them up to look at which one was balanced, which one was thrown out of balance, right?
Yes.
That's a great example.
Yeah. One looks like he cowered down, but it was balanced. The other one looks like everything is right from the outside, on the surface, but nothing was right.
Right.
So if one is so far out of balance, it could not be fixed, and the other one was exactly where it needed to be. The energy, he lowered himself to where he needed to be to connect with her, and that to me was what the difference was.
So in essence, he knew he was out of balance. That's why he submitted.
Yes. Yes. And you know, that's the word we use. Submit sounds like I give up or I didn't win. When you are in balance, you are winning. It's nothing that if you are seeking something and you do whatever it takes to get there, you are winning. If you can look at it from that perspective. So when we say, you know, he actually did submit, but he submitted to what he wanted, what he desired. And that was to connect with her.
I think that word submit becomes a dirty word when you look at it in Ephesians, when you talk about wives submit to your husband.
Yeah.
They have taken that totally out of context. And that is our first introduction to the word submit. Means that you are submitted to something that's stronger than you, as opposed to recognizing that you are submitting to an authority that has your best interest at heart.
Yes, I agree.
I've done premarital counseling, and during the course of it, I've said to the couple, to be honest with you, there's no reason for you guys to be married because you're too different. You're going to have all kinds of issues. However, I'm going to go ahead and perform this ceremony, but I don't see you being married for long. And then why would you do it then? There are some people who need to be married to figure out they don't need to be married because they're in love with the idea of being married, or they're in love with what they think they go get out of the marriage, as opposed to having a submissive attitude towards each other. Does that make sense?
It does indeed. I think as I was speaking with a relative a while back, sometimes people get caught up in the wedding and not thinking about the marriage, not giving enough consideration to it. That this is a lifelong commitment. At least it's supposed to be. And all the planning and all the flowers and all that stuff is great. But when it's all said and done, life goes on. So,
I have a question,
yes, ma'am.
Ron.
Yes, ma'am.
So, does marriage to everything is a season, right? So, are we supposed to be married? But in that relationship until as we say, the lifelong commitment.
Well, I Evelyn, I speak as someone who has matured, I guess, matured, has a little more wisdom than I did when I was younger. And, when I say that, I've been married before. I think you well know that. So I didn't mean that to say for anybody to feel bad if they're not in their marriage anymore. No, I'll be the first to tell you, and if you're being mistreated or not in a great relationship, why say in that? Just because somebody say it's supposed to be a lifelong. The spiritual side of it is what I'm talking about. We're in a great relationship, and what the young man that I spoke of is in a great position to make this something beautiful. To make it something good. That's what I'm talking about. And I look at couples who have been married 30, 40, 50 years and pay attention to how they relate to each other and how the children act around them. That to me is a beautiful thing. But I do not wish anybody to think that you or that I'm saying stay in something that's not working for you. Not at all.
Well, I think people do. Some people go in, well, the majority of people go in, they just plan on, okay, well, we're going to be together. We're going to live our life out, until the end. Some do that. And, but things happen, and a number of things happen. You grow apart, someone else come in and you're interested in them. So that's why I was saying, when you were saying that, we're supposed to be in a relationship, in a marriage, lifelong, that's supposed to be your lifelong partner. Sometimes things just don't work. That's all I want to say.
I couldn't agree more. And I think marriage is difficult because it is spiritual. It is a holy thing. It is not a lawful thing. It is.
Excuse me, Ron. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying. I think a lot of times we don't see it that way. We don't. When we enter into it, we're not. That is not our mindset. So that's part of it as well, though. But go ahead, Pastor.
I'm going to tell you something that. Go ahead. Is that someone about to speak? Okay. I'm going to tell you something that's really thought-provoking. We talk about how the church has messed up or gotten wrong everything, from baptism to becoming a member of a church, the whole 9 yards. But we never talk about how the church messed up this thing called marriage. Why is it that we think that the church blessing makes a marriage real when the church blessings has destroyed everything else spiritual? That makes sense?
Yeah, I never thought of it, but yes.
So until we get to a spiritual understanding of marriage and release ourselves from the damnable policies that was instituted by the church for selfish reasons, we will always struggle in talking about what a marriage looks like. Because I don't believe that we really know. And I will say this, that marriage license does not mean you are married. That marriage license means that you are inheritor. That's what you are. You are an inheritor. That's what that piece of paper means. It does not mean you're married. I know a number of people who are in the same house, and their marriage is a facade, whether it be because they're being mistreated, they're being manipulated, they're being beaten. All kinds of things take place behind those doors. Well, they're being browbeaten by the spouse, either one of the spouses browbeating the other one, the threats. All these things are taking place there. There are, according to what we have been told by the church about a marriage, nobody's married. Because those things that the church says we are to live up to, nobody has lived up to all of those things. No one has. So the question becomes, what is a spiritual marriage, not a religious one? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
And I don't want us to get so deeply into this about marriage, because there's so much meat in the scripture about being invited up. The invitation, there's so much in that we have not even seen. So go ahead, whoever was about to talk. I'll raise a question.
Can anyone have a question? Comment?
I mean, does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah, it makes
Yes.
sense.
Yes, it does.
Yes, sir.
Let me ask this question about marriage before we move from it. How many people who are married or have been married on this phone, or even intend to be married, can check all the boxes that the church says you're supposed to check in your marriage? Because according to the church, marriage is male dominated, is male controlled, is male manipulated. Everything in a marriage, according to the church, revolves around the male, masculinity, being dominant in every aspect of the relationship. Am I right about that?
Yes.
So if there's anyone who's married, who's not been like in a relationship like that, please talk to me. But I have a guy, I know this guy who's teaching his son. His son is about, 10, 11 years old, telling his son that you got to be the man in your house. You can't let your woman run the house. What is he doing to that child? What is he doing to that male? And there are times when it's done, but it's never said. It's the action that comes from that male, and he seeks to justify it by the standards of the church and the scriptures in an erroneous way. So I'm done with it unless there are questions. Thank you.
I did want to talk a little bit about the moving up part. Again, what I said was this is this is an internal thing. This is an internal growth. This is a moving from in your consciousness to a higher elevation. This is the desire of one who wishes to be spiritual, see his spiritual side, and not be mindful or follow his ego. This is the one who has walked away from religion and is seeking something more, although he may not know what it is. And as I said from the onset, this is not talking about men or women, but it is talking about masculinity and femininity. So when you talk about the moving higher, again, it is based on what we've said so far, that recognition of who I am and what I desire. I use the example of the young man because he saw the object of what he wanted. He saw, not to me anyway, his language. What he's saying is he saw beyond the physical woman. When he says, I want to grow old with you, that moves it to a different place. So that's the moving up. That's him seeing his femininity and releasing and that masculinity, that bulldog attitude, that attitude that had the boys over all the time, or sitting back watching ball games and going to play basketball every other night. All the stuff that he was doing, he saw something that night. And whatever it was he saw, he decided that this bullishness, this masculine energy has to be brought in under control. So that is the moving up. And it doesn't mean that he is weak in any kind of way. It is an act of moving the part of Ron that I have made to define myself. That part of me is not working in this area. That part of me has run its course, and there I see something more. I see something that I want to be attached to. I see something that I desire. I see the rest of my life, and I submit to the process, whatever it takes to get there. And that energy is what we're saying, is that feminine energy in you, that spiritual energy that's in you. That to me is the moving up higher. And I use an example so we could see that, and maybe have something to relate to, because we have sort of bought into or it being very difficult to release this energy that we built ourselves up as, and to release that and desire something else is the more. That is the gaining of the more. You're not losing anything. You're actually gaining yourself. And I feel like I came out of the blocks kind of stumbling. Is this making sense to you at all?
It is to me.
It is to me.
And I hope that it kind of tied into where we are too, kind of help us see each other, see ourselves in a way. We'll read verse 12 and kind of tie this part of it in, and we continue the discussion, okay? And if yes, ma'am.
This is Ramel. Before you we go into the next scripture, I have a question. At least I think it is. In the second scenario, if three of them had agreed to a marriage arrangement, would that have been more in balance or balance?
what is gained by it, though? What do you gain by that?
I don't
See,
I know
I
we have a movement where 3 people are getting married, 2 men and a woman, or 2 women
yeah,
and so
that seems to be popular right now. Yeah, you're right.
we see again.
Mhm.
We are marriage on the basis of what the church said is. There are people who never been down an aisle before, have never thrown a bouquet, have never even thought about getting a marriage license, and yet they are stronger in their relationship than those who profess to be in a righteous relationship because they got married at the courthouse or they got a marriage license. So, again, when we talk spiritually about marriage, it has to be a reevaluation of it because marriage, the coming together in a relationship that was committed relationship was in place long before there was a marriage license or a Christian church telling you what it is. Long before that, and if you look at Egypt, or if you look at African weddings prior to the Europeans putting their foot on the continent, what you will see is a relationship that is predicated on balance itself. There were kings in Africa and in Egypt who were female. This whole idea of the labeling a king or a queen, that did not originate in the places who had the first kings and queens. So when you were asked that question, Vermeil, then that becomes a cultural question more so than it is a Christian question, because there are people right now in this country, and I'm not talking about the Mormons either, who are in relationships, who are married to more than one person. And I'm not talking about, again, I'm not talking about the Mormons. There's a Jewish sect who still have multiple wives. And now, as to whether or not that is something that should be condemned, then that question becomes, who is the judge to determine what that marriage is if it's a working relationship?
Okay.
Pastor, I that resonates with me in terms of that is a really important thing for us to understand, especially since there are so many references in the Bible where it compares things to a marriage. So, there's a thread all throughout the Old Testament and the New Testament where things are being compared to a marriage. So, yeah, I think that's important for us to understand.
I agree. I think I don't quite understand the spiritual meaning of marriage. I think that's what, when I look at the question I asked, I think that's the question that's underneath for me. Maybe I don't really understand what marriage is spiritually. And I'm basing it upon man's worldly or religion's worldly marriage.
Well, for me, it is a lot easier to talk about what it's not than what it is. I don't know why, but it is.
I can try to connect it to the wedding a little bit. Hello. In the scriptures was drawing started off with in Luke. He was talking about the person actually being invited and essentially not appointing themselves. And because we don't have the true spiritual understanding of it that's just drawn out, it's not necessarily extremely clear. But when Pastor Richard Ron talked about balance, it is a balance and a humbling from within the inner self of that particular person. It is a yielding, in a sense, to allow other things to take place and not automatically appoint you, which then allows you, in a sense, to be met, if you want to think about a marriage in terms of being attached to, and not you forcing or dictating that particular relationship. So even in the situation where Ron mentioned the two examples, in one, the person was trying to dictate the terms, dictate how that relationship worked. They were not necessarily willing to give. It was things on, or more so on their terms, not even a regard for the other person necessarily. In the situation we were talking about, the guy on his job, the guy was saying, hey, I'm not just trying to make this person be with me. I am willing to, because I care about this person so much, respect and have a regard for them and care for them to the point where I adore them in a sense. It's something that I actually value for how it is and what it is, and then meaning is another recognition as well. Now, even in order to do that, one must have a certain amount of confidence in themselves, or to know themselves, feel comfortable with themselves, etc. So, for example, going back to the parable in the Bible, I'm trying to tie it all in, but I feel like I'm bouncing back and forth with these examples. If I go to a wedding and I'm sure of myself and I'm just happy to be there and be a part of it, I don't have to go and sit on the first row. I just feel honored to be there and witness it, number one. And I realize me being on the, I don't have to be on the first row because I don't have to necessarily feel important. It's not about me. Again, because it's not about me, I am allowing myself then to experience something different, or to take part in the ceremony that these other people actually have going on. I'm not sitting there or automatically making it a part of my self. So a lot of times when we talk about marriage, or we talk about marriage from a spiritual standpoint, it is not only just respect. So it's not the idea that, hey, I'm not going to just do something what I deem bad or what I've been told is bad. It goes even much deeper than that, to the point where you have a regard for the person, you care for the person, you see the worth of the person, you admire the person, and then your interactions with that person, or the way that you approach and deal with that person, follows that. You value them greatly. Now, also, were there any questions before I add a little bit more to that, or comments? Okay. Going further with this marriage thing, what then also happens, because one has in a sense made themselves soft, not only are they discovering things about that marriage, or in this particular situation, that other person, but in doing that, they're also discovering things about themselves and allowing that to happen. It is through our interactions and our close bonds with others that we can, or allow, and we even do, find out more things about ourselves, because in a sense, we are experiencing ourselves in a different way as we bond and connect to that other person. The discovery continues, the discovery grows, and even your own identity and who you are and how you relate to yourself and that other person grows.
Correct. It is endless.
Yes. And
No.
one last, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's just one last thing that I meant to say I remembered. Now, if I go to and I mentioned this one time before as well, but it was actually at a homegoing service. But even if I don't appoint myself and I go there humbly, and we kind of look at the word as being humbly, so I'm doing the air quotes when I say humbly, to this particular wedding, I sit in the back, and then as the parable say, the person in charge actually comes and say, no, my friend, come up to the front and stuff like that. Now all of a sudden, I'm also seeing or knowing, not seeing so much, but I have an appreciation and it's being expressed to me of how much that person cares about me as well, not me just walking around thinking how I should be. And I mentioned before one time just going to a homegoing service, and the family was understandably grieving a lot. And I didn't really see myself as important or anything, and just kind of like being in the backdrop and wasn't trying to just be seen or anything, but just coming there for support. And everybody kind of like would turn their attention to me and was so thankful and really, appreciated. And it was definitely heartfelt that I came. And this was even like kind of some of them fairly conservative, but like, white family. And that was just like, very, shocking to me in terms of how important my presence was to them. And here I am just thinking like, basically like, people couldn't, I wouldn't say people couldn't care less, but it was understandable. That's not why I came. That's not what I expected, to the point where it affected me emotionally. Like, wow, I didn't really see and understand that y'all considered me or thought of me, so importantly. And it wasn't so much the words, but it was the heartfeltness and the warmness of it. Again, one must make themselves soft or vulnerable to actually experience the greatest depth of love and that bond. There's a connection there where the more rigid you are, the harder it is, and the less that you actually experience and even have that experience within your own self. So in a sense, knowing love. I'm finished. I feel like we're all over the place, and I'm finished for now.
Thank you, Sheldon.
No, you weren't all over the place. You made me think about something. There was one other comment the young man made that God, it just slipped my mind. That I thought. Oh yeah, he told her, "You're everything that I wanted, and I almost missed it. Let's fix this." That to me was awesome. That is something that you don't see from people do with another person. That's rare to me. But something Sheldon said made me think about this. Back in the day, in Jesus' day, part of weddings were they got to know each other. The families come together and they spent time together, and they even talked about what the bride needed in that house, in that in the new house, and so it was they weren't strangers when they came together. When Sheldon talked about, although it was a homegoing service, it's the same thing, that same type of energy. When these people came to a wedding, you were an active participant. You weren't there like you see weddings now. Oh, so and so get married. Let's go and you know, this was this was more than that. So the active participant being not that you were part of the wedding party and stood up there, no, but how many times have we said on this phone, the energy of the people on this phone is what feeds the answers, feeds the questions. So if these two people are standing up there, getting married, and you love and adore them, your energy, your feelings, your emotions, your love, your compassion, all that is a part of this. So you were not only there to witness the nuptial, you were an active part in the energy and the love that was felt in that room. So that was a very important part of it too. It wasn't just a bunch of strangers who just showed up that came that didn't know the couple. It was something very, very special about that. I just wanted to add that part. Questions or comments, y'all?
I have a question. It can go for you or either real. It's almost like the Caucasian. It's almost like people want to have a wedding like their wedding. So I'm getting ready to ask you: is a wedding you married when you have a wedding in the church, or is you married when you have a go to a judge or whatever, get married, or is you married if you was in the street as a bum or however you say it, and each man and woman been together for so long they know each other, and to them, in the eyes of God, they feel like they're married because they've been together for so long and they know each other. So explain that.
Pastor, please.
It's not about getting married like a Caucasian. That's not it at all. It's about being married under the principle of the doctrine of the church. And what I mean by that is this. Catholics are supposed to marry Catholics, or they are to convert. And Protestants are supposed to marry Protestants, whether it be Baptists or Methodists or whatever. And those of you who think that that's a bit rigid, then think about this. Well, if you get married in the church, the first thing they want to know is the person you marry, are they a member of the church? That's no different than the Catholic saying you have to convert if you're not a Catholic marrying a Catholic. So the essence of what I'm saying basically is all marriages, as we know them, are based on the doctrines of men. I had opportunity to participate in an African wedding when I was in college. One of my friends got married, and she had an African wedding. And as Ron said, no one popped in just to see what an African wedding looked like. Everyone there was a participant in more ways than just their presence, which is in itself powerful. So if we are to talk about marriage, we have to, I'm sorry, Charles, I'm getting away from your question. If that person in the street, as you put it, and they've been together for years, and they treat each other the way they should be, and their hearts are joined together, no, they do not need a piece of paper to be married. As I said at the onset, that marriage license makes you an inheritor. You inherit the things of the spouse. That's what that paper does. That paper does not mean that you're married. And I now pronounce you man and woman, or husband and wife. I pronounce you husband and wife. That does not mean that you're married, because this is what, by the power vested in me by the state of South Carolina, I pronounce you husband and wife. That does not mean you're married. That means that you received the quote-unquote blessings, or you received another word that what you received is the approval of some clergyman or some ecclesiastical body. You met their approval. That's what that pronouncement comes from. However, when your hearts are joined together, you don't need a pronouncement. You don't need that at all. Honestly, weddings are showpieces. Marriages are not. Marriages are for other people to see. Marriage is an intimate thing that takes place in the secret chambers of your heart. I'm done. Unless there are questions, or Charles, is that clear?
Thank you, Rev. That's clear.
Okay. Back to you,
I
Ron.
wanted to say one comment about that. No man outside of a marriage can ever be authorized to determine that someone is married, meaning that it is the heart of those individuals involved that actually dictate that. And so no man on the outside can actually say, okay, this checks a box in a sense as it relates to marriage, because it is a spiritual thing. That's, according to the marriage license or it being done in the church or anything like that. Nothing outside those two individuals actually certifies that marriage. I'm finished.
I want to say this about spirituality. It kind of helps me see it a little bit, because that's not something that can be defined, and that might be why we're having a hard time with it. I remember some years ago when we were still meeting in Columbia and in Gaffney, Pastor made a statement, and I don't remember the statement word for word, but the thing that we pursued has captured us. We keep coming to this phone every week, and we understand where we are now, individually and collectively. There's nothing to go back to. So something has happened that we can't explain or write it down, but you're in a different place than you were a year ago. You're in a different place certainly than you were 5 years ago. And it is even last year we were in a committed place, but some of it was uneasiness, meaning that it was hard to say, wrap your mind around, I am Elohim, Elohim and I are one, and those things. And when you move to a place, it wasn't, all happened to all of us at one time, but individually, as we became comfortable with where we are, you felt the energy change. You felt the closeness with each other. You felt the longing to get on the phone on Saturday morning and the desire to feel more. That's the spirituality. And that's the thing we talk about. We have been caught up, if you will, for lack of a better term, in something that we did not see when we started this journey. So, and I hope that makes sense. And if not, ask a question.
Ron, Ron, I have to agree with you that struggle is real in terms of our talking about or trying to explain what a marriage is, which as you said, is spiritual, and it's really a struggle to do that because you cannot define spiritual things you experience, and a marriage is something that you experience long before you walk down an aisle or do anything of that nature. You experience that. At least that's what you think you're experiencing anyway. That's why you do it.
Yeah.
So I agree wholeheartedly that it's very difficult, if not impossible. That you've heard the term "a marriage is what you make it." The determiner of that relationship, as Sheldon stated, is you. So, and I know that you're not in that space, Ron. That you have, the scriptures you read, rather. I do think.
Say the last part.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that again. I didn't hear you, Pastor. Say that last part again.
We're not in that space. Or that you read in terms of the humility that it takes to take the back seat as opposed to coming up to the front seat, and then the whole idea of the invitation that's extended to the poor as opposed to the wealthy. All of this is talking about our spiritual personality, how we're supposed to be spiritually from an internal perspective, than it is talking about something external. And I do believe that maybe that's why we are here on this subject of marriage, because it is also an internal experience, and the depth of it is very difficult to determine because of the depth of spirituality that's involved in becoming one in a relationship, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Now, I don't believe that we won't ever know, because everything that we've struggled with, at some point, somebody saw it. And that's my expectation with this as well. Thank you.
We've been on the phone over an hour, but there's a part of this that I'm kind of excited about. I just want to read it, or if you don't mind, verse 12 and 13. It says, and he also went on to say to the one who had invited him, when you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brother or your relatives or rich neighbors, lest they also invite you in return, and repayment come to you. But when you give a reception, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed, since they do not have the means to repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. What is that saying? If you go back, and I said each one of these is you. This is an internal thing. So what is that saying then? The friends, the brother, the relatives, the rich neighbors, all of that is a part of you. When we came out of religion, when we came out, there's probably about 99% of us that's easily we can give up. You give up and you submit this and you're fine. It doesn't bother you. It doesn't even cost you anything. But that one little piece, the cripple in you, the lame in you, what does all that mean? There is a part of each and every one of us that we struggle with. There is a part of you that may have gone through some type of abuse. There is a part of you that may be prideful in some area. Have you ever reached a point where you feel exalted, you just feel good, and you say, wow, I like to stay in this place, and then something comes to you that you thought you had dealt with? Something, and what that something is, it pops in your mind because it is saying, while you were at this place, you were strong enough to deal with this. Let's take a look at this again. So when it talks about the cripple and the lame and the poor, it's talking about that piece of you that we have buried down, that piece of you that we don't look in the eye, that we see and we buried it and we keep it there because it is uncomfortable to us. And that is why, from an external perspective, it is easy to turn our back on these type of people because we can't deal with it within ourselves, and it reminds us of ourselves. So what he's saying is, if you, especially if you want to look at this from a church or religious perspective, I can invite all of my rich friends and brothers and all those people all I want. All I'm doing is going in a circle. It's the cycle. It's the cycle that Nick talked about when he talked about the energy cycles and all the stuff that's happening. You cannot tell me that our desires, that our energy does not bring all these things together at one time. The lining up of the planets, the age of Aquarius, all these things happening now. Why? It is not happenstance. So this cycle that keeps going on and on and on is opportunity. And when you look inside of yourself and you see those ugly things that you haven't dealt with, or those ugly things that you may even need help dealing with, those are the things in you that you can't, that you struggle with trying to bring enlightenment to. Things that have overtaken you in the past that you have struggled with. So that's what he's saying. And the reason why that is so important, because just like that desire, and we talked about the solar plex and the energy levels and all that stuff, when I can tackle that, when I can put my heart and bring in enlightenment to my hurts and my pains, then that is also enlightenment that is going to touch somebody else. It's going to help somebody else to see that. That energy is going to be felt outside of me. So, does that make sense? Questions or comments? Well, does it make sense?
For me, Ron, yes.
It makes
It does.
Okay. Does anybody see anything else in there that Pastor, anything?
Based on what you were saying, Ron,
Yes, sir.
I think what you were saying also is that all of us are broken. In some kind of way, we are broken.
Yes.
And we have to come face to face with that before we can actually be who we were created to be. It's not just saying we're Elohim and just moving on. It's also dealing with what it looks like to be Elohim, the honesty of it all, the acceptance of the realization and acceptance of the brokenness and the willingness to be to render yourself vulnerable enough to be able to deal with that or bring it to a place of resolution. And if you're not, to be vulnerable enough to get someone to help you get to that place.
Yes, sir. I think, and this is just, I'm sorry, go ahead. No, I was just going to say, this is just my opinion. I think we're at a place where the universe trusts us, and we are showing things and seeing things that has not been readily available to men who have not desired this. So these things, we are able now. We have the strength. We have the brotherhood within our group the love, the compassion, the energy to help and guide each other through this, so that we can be that help and guide for others as others battle these things that the chaos that we see. So I think this kind of shows us where we are, sort of, because that rich person in you and those brothers and friends are easy to deal with. You don't give much thought to those parts of you because they're already in line. They already do what is expected. But it's just a little bit of a little bit more.
And that's the part of you that's settled with who you are.
Yes. And this is a part of that commitment.
And I also believe that this is, when you said the universe trusts us,
Yes.
I believe that, excuse me, the struggles that we faced and the efforts that we have put forth over the years to understand truth, our efforts to capture truth has allowed truth to capture us. And I think that, I believe that this type of initiation is the type of initiation that was spoken of in Kemet, when you had to be initiated in order for you to receive the sacred understandings of the universe, or the sacred education that was offered in Kemet, that initiation being desire and commitment. And I do believe that, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that desire and commitment has definitely been shown in the efforts that we've made to get to the place where we are, knowing that we've not seen it all, never will, yet we're still traveling this journey to see what it brings for humanity at the next station.
Yes, sir. If you guys don't mind, we've been on the phone about an hour and 20 minutes or so. Maybe it'd be a good place to pause if you don't have any questions or comments.
Good.
I feel like I stumbled out of the blocks on this. I don't know why I was a little nervous tonight, but I hope this made sense. If not, let know, and we'll go back and look at it again.
Right. Don't do that. You did not stumble out the block. We believe, we've always said this. Things happen the way they are supposed to. We didn't mention any exceptions, did we? So,
But
if you stumbled out of the blocks, you stumbled into something that was much needed, and that is the discussion that we've had this evening. So there is no need for any apologies whatsoever. Your search for truth is not always a smooth ride, but guess what? You're still on the journey, taking the ride.
Agree.
yeah, okay. Well, I hope it made sense, and if there are no questions or comments, a good place to take a pause. And I thank you guys for your time, and especially those who had comments and questions, and look forward to seeing you Saturday. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good week.
Great job, Ron.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Bye. Good night.